Imagine sitting in this really cold, sterile clinic room. You're looking across the desk, but there isn't actually a doctor sitting there.
Right, it's just a screen.
Exactly, just a screen. And you are receiving this critical medical diagnosis from an artificial intelligence. A perfectly calm, synthesized voice tells you that you have a malignant lung nodule.
Which is terrifying.
Right. Naturally, your immediate response, I mean, the only human response really is to ask, why? How do you know?
Yeah.
But the screen is just silent. The AI cannot explain its reasoning to you at all. It just knows.
And that scenario, that is the exact nightmare keeping hospital administrators awake at night right now.
Oh, I bet.
I mean, a binary diagnosis delivered without a single shred of transparent logic. In medicine, accepting a life-altering conclusion without an explanation is a fundamentally dangerous proposition.
Which brings us to the core mission of today's deep dive. We're really trying to explore this massive, crucial canyon between an AI that gets the right answer and, an AI that gets the right answer for the right reasons.
Yeah.
To do that, we're unpacking this fascinating new research paper. It introduces something called FunnyNodules, which is such a great name. It's this highly customizable, completely synthetic medical data set.
And it was built for one specific purpose, right?
Mm-hmm.
To evaluate what researchers call explainable AI, or XAI.
Right. So the researchers here are basically constructing this highly controlled, almost mathematically perfect sandbox.
Yeah, they're figuring out how to essentially put machine learning models on the couch, audit their internal reasoning mechanisms, and determine if we can actually trust them with human lives.
I just love the idea of putting an algorithm in therapy. It's like a literal BS detector for medical AI.
It really is.
Because we are so conditioned to look at a software's accuracy score, see like a 99%, and just start cheering. But this paper completely ignores the victory lap and digs into the messy reality underneath.
Well, the thing is, we have become incredibly proficient at evaluating the final prediction. I mean, you can feed 1 million chest scans into a modern model, and it will flag a tumor with just staggering accuracy. But evaluating the underlying logic, the actual sequence of visual conclusions that the math used to arrive at that flag, that is currently one of the absolute biggest bottlenecks in the entire field of machine learning.
Okay, so before we can really appreciate why this FunnyNodules dataset is such a massive breakthrough, let's unpack why real-world medical data is actually pretty terrible for testing an AI's logic.
Yeah, because on the surface, you'd totally assume real CT scans from real patients would be the ultimate gold standard, right?
Right, exactly. Like, just use real lungs.
It seems intuitive. But real medical imagery has massive structural flaws when it comes to training explainable AI. I mean, set aside the logistical hurdles of gathering that data.
Which are huge.
Oh, absolutely. The astronomical cost of paying expert radiologists to just sit there and annotate thousands of scans. But the deeper issue is that real data sets completely lack comprehensive ground truth for explanations.
Okay, let's define ground truth in this context for everyone.
Sure. So when a radiologist looks at a real CT scan, they might circle a blurry mass and label the file cancer. But they are incredibly busy.
Yeah, they have a waiting room full of people.
Exactly. They almost never sit there for 3 hours drawing a microscopic map of every single pixel, document exactly which jagged margin, which shadow, and which specific density change led them to that conclusion.
So the data provides the final answer, but it doesn't provide a pixel-perfect map of the reasoning.
Right. And because of that structural gap in the training material, AI models become notorious for finding lazy shortcuts.
Oh, lazy shortcuts.
Yeah. An algorithm might correctly diagnose a disease 1,000 times in a row, but it might be doing so by locking onto a completely irrelevant artifact in the image.
Like what?
Well, for instance, maybe it noticed a faint ruler watermark from a specific hospital scanning machine, and it somehow figured out that images from that specific hospital usually contain positive cancer cases.
Oh, wow. So the model learns watermark equals cancer. That reminds me of a high school math test. The AI is that student who writes down the correct final answer at the very bottom of the page.
Yeah.
But when the teacher says, show your work, the paper is completely blank. Or worse, the work they do show is just a bunch of random doodles that somehow magically sum up to the number 42.
That's a perfect way to look at it. You can't give that student an A because you know for a fact they didn't actually learn the math.
Right.
So to build truly trustworthy systems, we need a testing ground where the work is already perfectly mapped out from the start. I mean, if the developers don't know exactly what visual features the AI should be looking at in the first place, they have absolutely no baseline to grade the explanations the AI eventually spits out.
Which brings us to the drastic step these researchers took. They stopped trying to wrangle messy, incomplete hospital data, and they decided to just play God.
Yeah, they built their own artificial universe from scratch.
Mm.
Enter FunnyNodules.
Enter FunnyNodule. So what is it exactly?
It's a fully parameterized synthetic data set. Basically, the team wrote a mathematical algorithm that generates abstract grayscale shapes.
Okay.
Visually, they look vaguely like lung nodules on a scan, but they're entirely generated by code.
Okay, let's pause here because I can hear you at home shouting at your speakers. Like, wait a minute, these are just fake, abstract grayscale blobs. Why on earth should anyone care about an advanced medical AI diagnosing a fake blob instead of a real human lung?
Yeah, that is definitely the most common pushback to synthetic data. But it kind of misses the fundamental objective of the experiment.
How so?
The goal here is not to simulate realistic human biology. The goal is to create a flawless, highly controlled environment that isolates the AI's core logic circuits.
Oh, I see.
Because with real data, you never truly know if the model is cheating by looking at background noise, like we talked about with the watermarks. But with these synthetic images, the researchers control every single atom of the picture.
So it's a completely sterile environment. No watermarks, no accidental shadows.
Right.
But if they aren't using real lung scans, what exactly is the AI looking at? Are the researchers just like drawing random circles in MS Paint?
Not at all. The algorithm generates these images using 6 highly specific dials. Think of it like a video game character creator.
Oh, like when you adjust the sliders for cheekbones or whatever.
Exactly. But instead of adjusting a character's cheekbones or hair color, you are adjusting the visual attributes of a tumor.
Okay, let's group these dials to get a picture of this sandbox. First, you have the overall shape. There is a dial for roundness, right?
Yes, sliding from a perfect circle all the way to a stretched out oval.
Then there's this great medical term, spiculation.
Right, speculation.
That dial controls how jagged or spiky the edges are, going from totally smooth to just covered in sharp spikes.
Then you have dials for visual texture, like edge sharpness slides from a very crisp hard border to a soft, blurry fade into the background.
Got it.
You also have straightforward dials for size, scaling from small to large, and intensity, which shifts the blob from dark to bright.
And the final dial is kind of unique because it isn't a sliding scale at all. It's internal structure, and it is strictly binary, 0 or 1.
Yes, either there is a textured little subregion sitting inside the blob, or the blob is completely empty inside.
So why all these specific dials?
Well, the brilliance of this setup lies in the target class, which represents the final diagnosis score that the AI is actually supposed to guess.
Okay.
That final score is generated through a strict, predefined mathematical rulebook based entirely on those 6 dials.
Wait, so the researchers know with absolute 100% certainty the mathematical recipe for a diagnosis.
Exactly. There is zero ambiguity.
If the AI looks at an image and says, the malignancy score is a 4, the researchers can look at the back-end math and verify it. Like, did you arrive at 4 because you recognized it was a large, spiky oval, or did you just guess?
Precisely. Armed with this ultimate sandbox, the researchers can actually start running interrogations. And one of the primary mechanisms they test for is a concept called contrastivity.
Contrastivity. That sounds like a setting hidden deep in the menu of my television.
Yeah, it does.
What does that actually mean when we are putting an AI on the couch?
So contrastivity measures how well an AI's explanation distinguishes its final answer from other possible outcomes.
Okay.
A good explanation should highlight exactly what makes this specific image different from the alternatives. And because FunnyNodules is generated by code, the team can run a what-if experiment to test this.
I love the methodology here. Walk us through the what-if scenario.
Sure. The team generates 100 identical nodules. Every single image is exactly the same in roundness, size, edge sharpness, and intensity.
Okay, they're identical clones.
Right. Then they slowly turn up only the speculation dial.
Only the spikes.
Exactly. They take the sequence from a smooth edge to a slightly bumpy edge, all the way to a fiercely jagged edge, and every other variable remains entirely frozen.
Oh, that's like sitting in the chair at the optometrist for an eye exam, Better 1, or better 2, better 3. You are isolating a single solitary variable to see exactly what makes the brain or the algorithm, in this case, change its mind.
And if the AI has genuinely learned the underlying rules, its final diagnostic prediction should shift in exact proportion to that one changing dial.
And did it?
Well, the paper highlights a specific model called HigherVit that actually handled this speculation test beautifully.
Okay, let's define higher V2 really quickly for the listener, because that's some heavy jargon. What is that model actually doing?
So HigherV stands for Hierarchical Vision Transformer. Imagine taking a photograph and cutting it up into a grid of tiny patches, kind of like a Sudoku board.
Okay, I can picture that.
The model analyzes each tiny patch individually, then looks at how those small patches relate to form larger regions, basically building up a hierarchical understanding of the whole image.
Got it. So it's building the image from the ground up, and it successfully noticed when the researchers cranked up the spiky edges.
It did. But the testing wasn't all passing grades. I mean, things fell apart pretty spectacularly when they introduced conditional rules.
Conditional rules.
Yeah, and the failures are really the most revealing part of the study. So the researchers programmed a complex conditional rule into their math. They set it up so that the effect of the roundness dial completely flips depending on the binary internal structure dial.
Meaning if a blob has no internal structure, being perfectly round might add points to the cancer score.
Yes.
But the moment an internal structure appears inside the blob, being round suddenly subtracts points from the score.
Exactly. It is a highly correlated relationship.
And how did the AI handle that?
The models entirely failed to grasp this conditional logic. I mean, they evaluated roundness in a total vacuum. When the mathematical rule flipped based on the internal structure, the AI's logic circuits just shorted out. It was a massive blind spot.
That is wild, because if you think about deploying an AI like that in a real hospital where symptoms constantly interact and change each other's severity, I mean, it's terrifying.
It really is.
But exposing that failure is the entire point of the sandbox, right? It gives developers a literal map of where their architecture is breaking down.
Exactly. It moves the process from guesswork to targeted engineering. But the team wanted to go further than just testing isolated rules.
What else did they do?
They wanted a way to grade the AI's overall trustworthiness and boil it down to a single objective mathematical score.
This is where the paper introduces a literal mathematical BS detector. They call it the trust index, or the TI.
Yes.
So how do you calculate a single number for trust?
Well, the trust index mathematically compares two distinct performance metrics. It looks at the error rate of the model predicting the final diagnosis, and it subtracts the error rate of the model identifying the underlying visual attributes.
Okay.
And the absolute gold standard you are striving for is a trust index of 0, meaning the AI is equally proficient at spotting the symptoms and arriving at the conclusion.
Okay, let's run the scenarios on this. What does the math tell us if the trust index comes out as a positive number?
So a positive TI occurs when the error rate for the attributes is much higher than the error rate for the final target.
Which means?
This means the model is getting the final diagnosis highly accurate, but it is failing miserably at identifying the actual shapes and edges.
So this is our high school student passing the final exam by secretly copying off their neighbor's paper. They got the answer right for completely the wrong reason.
Yes, and that right there is the nightmare scenario for a hospital administrator.
Why?
Because if you buy a software package with a high positive TI, it will look like a miracle tool on the sales brochure because the top-line accuracy is phenomenal.
Right, the accuracy is 99%.
Exactly, but the internal logic is fundamentally fraudulent. The moment that model encounters a real patient scan that differs even slightly from its training data, it will fail catastrophically and no one will understand why.
Wow, that makes perfect sense. So let's look at the flip side. What happens if the formula outputs a negative trust index?
And negative TI means the model perfectly identifies all the visual attributes. I mean, it knows the nodule is round, it sees the blurry edges, it measures the size perfectly.
Okay.
But it fails to map those correct attributes to the correct final diagnosis.
Wait, hold on. I need to push back on that.
Sure.
If the AI perfectly sees that the mass is huge, jagged, and dark, how on earth does it get the final diagnosis wrong? That seems like a massive flaw in the most basic logic. Why does that happen?
It usually happens due to the architecture of the model itself. The study tested this using something called a concept bottleneck model.
Concept bottleneck, what's that?
You can think of a concept bottleneck model like a doctor who is strictly forbidden from giving a final diagnosis until they first fill out a mandatory itemized checklist of symptoms.
Okay.
The model is literally forced to establish the concepts before it can output the target.
Oh, so it's forced to show its work before it gets to the bottom of the page.
It's exactly the point of the design. However, when the researchers train this bottleneck model on a very small data set, which is unfortunately the standard reality in medical imaging, it produced a highly negative trust index.
Interesting.
It became amazing at filling out the checklist, but the lack of diverse data meant it never learned the complex mathematical relationships required to turn that checklist into a final score.
But wait, because FunnyNodules is a synthetic sandbox, they aren't limited by real-world data scarcity. They could just, like, click a button and generate 100,000 more training images.
And that's exactly what they did. And when they scaled up the data set massively, the bottleneck model's trust index moved dramatically closer to zero.
So it fixed it.
Yes, it finally had enough examples to learn the complex mapping. It proves the incredible value of synthetic data. You can generate unlimited scenarios to force a model to learn the connective tissue between symptoms and disease.
Man, it really highlights how data-starved the medical AI field is right now. But beyond these formulas and error rates, the FunnyNodules framework allows researchers to do something even more visceral.
Yes, we are transitioning from mathematical auditing to visual auditing.
Right, because they can literally see where the AI's brain is looking.
Because the images are generated entirely by code, the dataset automatically produces what are called regions of interest, or ROIs.
Let's visualize this for the listener. The code doesn't just generate a blurry blob. It generates a perfect pixel-by-pixel map.
Right.
It creates an overlay that highlights the exact coordinates of the blurry edge or the exact coordinates of the spiky surface.
It creates an indisputable ground truth map for every single attribute. And researchers can then take those perfect maps and lay them directly over the AI's attention heat maps.
Attention heat maps.
Yeah, these are generated by the model to show exactly which pixels it was focusing its mathematical weight on when making a decision.
And when they ran this visual comparison on that higher viewed model we talked about earlier, they found a pretty glaring issue regarding how the AI pays attention.
The visual evidence was damning, really. When the AI was explicitly asked to evaluate the edge sharpness of a nodule, its attention heat map showed that it was just broadly looking at the entire general contour of the whole shape.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it wasn't tightly focusing its mathematical attention on the specific border region it was supposed to be analyzing.
It's like asking a detective how they know a suspect is guilty. And instead of pointing their finger directly at the muddy footprints on the floor, they just wave their hands vaguely at the entire city block.
That is a brilliant way to frame it.
The spatial like the literal pixels the AI was staring at was smeared across the whole image instead of zeroing in on the edges.
And that raises a critical issue for clinical deployment, right? If an AI's spatial attention isn't tightly aligned with the physical, anatomical location of a symptom, the explanation it provides is practically useless. Because if a doctor asks, "Why is this malignant?" and the AI highlights the entire lung and says because of the edge, but the heat map proves it wasn't actually looking at the edge, that is false transparency.
Yeah, it's just giving the illusion of an explanation to pacify the human user without offering any actual clinical value. And this actually ties into another way these systems try to explain themselves, something called prototype reasoning.
Right. Prototype reasoning is a very different approach. Instead of highlighting pixels, the AI tries to explain its logic the way a human doctor might.
Okay, how so?
It essentially says, I believe the malignancy score is a 5. Because the speculation on this image looks exactly like the speculation on this other training example I saw in the past.
So this new thing looks like that old thing.
Exactly, a comparison to a prototype. And with the FunnyNodule sandbox, researchers can quantitatively test if the AI is pulling the right prototype for the right attribute.
Ah, I see.
They can check if the model's prototype for a spiky edge actually matches the dataset's mathematical ground truth definition of a spiky edge. It adds just another profound layer of auditing to the AI's honesty.
Okay, let's pull all of this together. If we take a step back from the grayscale blobs, the vision transformers, and the trust index math, what is the ultimate takeaway for you listening at home?
Yeah, what's the big picture?
The researchers behind FunnyNodules, they aren't trying to replace real medical scans with fake abstract art, That is not the end game here. They are building a highly calibrated flight simulator for artificial intelligence.
The flight simulator analogy captures the mission perfectly, I think.
Hmm.
You would never put a rookie pilot into the cockpit of a commercial jet filled with passengers without putting them through hundreds of hours in a simulator first.
Never.
Because in a simulator, the instructors can control the weather, they can fail the engines at will, and they can test the pilot's reflexes in a perfectly monitored environment.
Exactly. And by controlling every single pixel and every mathematical rule in this synthetic data set, developers can audit exactly how machine learning models think.
Right.
They can catch lazy logic like our detective waving their hands at the whole city block, and they can expose a model's false confidence before that software ever makes it into a real hospital room.
It is really about forcing an industry-wide shift. We have to move beyond simply measuring a model's accuracy and start measuring its truthfulness.
It's truthfulness.
Yes, data sets like FunnyNodules are the crucial stepping stones required to build medical AI that doctors, and more importantly patients, can genuinely trust.
It completely reframes how you look at the future of diagnostic medicine, but it also leaves us with a lingering, slightly philosophical thought to ponder. The Funny Nodule sandbox works so beautifully because we, the human creators, can mathematically define every single attribute with absolute perfection. We wrote the rulebook. We defined what a 1 is and what a 5 is.
We engineered a closed universe where absolute truth exists.
Right. But human biology is chaotic. It doesn't follow a clean mathematical rulebook.
Not at all.
Doctors often diagnose complex conditions based on intuition, on incredibly subtle patterns, and on a synthesis of factors that we don't even have the clinical vocabulary for yet.
That's very true.
So if an AI requires perfectly clean, synthetic, mathematically defined rules to prove to us that it can think logically, what happens when we eventually ask it to explain a disease that humanity itself hasn't even fully defined yet?
That is the ultimate frontier. And it is a staggering challenge for the next generation of explainable AI.
Imagine sitting in that cold clinic room again, the AI delivers a diagnosis, and you ask, why?
Yeah.
The machine might not be silent because its logic circuits are broken. It might be silent because it's seeing a truth in your biology that we simply haven't learned how to speak yet. And until we learn that language, we'll have to keep building better sandboxes.